For those of you new here, I'm Toni, a behavior analyst.
And I'm Kate, a parent of 2 children on the autism spectrum.
Sip and Stim is a podcast for parents and caregivers navigating autism and everyday life.
Pour a cup, take a break, settle down and join us on a whim. Gentle thoughts, honest talks, it's time for a sip and stim.
So today we're very excited to have someone very near and dear to Kate's heart. Her husband, Derek, who's sitting here with us. He's a behavior analyst, and we're gonna get to know a little bit about him. And so Derek, you have 2 children on the autism spectrum. You're a behavior analyst. When did you become a BCBA?
Well, my journey to become a BCBA starts with education, maybe a different background from yours, because my degree was in music education. So I started, teaching choirs, teaching, bands and things like that. And one thing that I really did notice from teaching was how much behavior factors into teaching, So you're managing a lot of different kids, a lot of different behaviors. And at that time, I didn't have really the knowledge that I do now in behavior modification. So it was a little challenging dealing with groups and things like that. And I had noticed Kate, she started working as a behavior tech and worked with this population that I really had not known much about, except for maybe 1 or 2 kids in my childhood, like childhood friends. Their siblings had, autism, more of the severe type of autism, like what you would call now level 3. But I didn't really know much about it. And then Kate was working as behavior tech. She really told me all the stories of how fun the kids were to work with and all of the perks and happiness of being in that kind of position. She also warned me of some of the challenges that come with that position as well, but I felt like it was something that I could really get into. So I changed careers. I went and worked as what they called a TSS at the time in Pennsylvania, therapeutic support staff, worked with a number of clients with intellectual disabilities and more severe autism. And at that time, with a master's degree, I had thought that, I'll just get a license at that time. But they didn't want anybody at that time in education that weren't in special ed. So we ended up in sort of a situation where the application got rejected. So they're like, hey, time to go back to school. So I went to Eastern University and got a postgraduate certificate in applied behavior analysis. And as they say, the rest is history. Now I'm working currently with ABA Centers of Pennsylvania as a Board Certified Behavior Analyst, working with kids with various autism needs, and a lot of parent training as well. One thing that I think makes ABA centers unique is that they require 5% of all hours that are provided by the technician need to be caregiver training. So a lot of companies I know, they provide minimum of 1 hour per month. We provide about 1 to 2 hours per week of parent training.
That's great.
Because the literature and the studies show that caregiver buy-in and working, having the caregivers able to provide that intervention to the kids provides better outcomes long term.
Yeah, this is kind of a little bit off topic, but I have a friend who was born and raised in Brazil, and they don't have the services we have here. And the way that really children get their needs met and they're able to learn those things like communication, social skills, is solely through a parent training model. So they actually bring these parents into the centers and they train them as their RBTs. and then they send them home. And if they're not willing to participate, it's intense. If they're not willing to participate, they're discharged, and that service is offered to someone else that has needs. So I think it's wonderful that your company really pushes for a high level of parent involvement. It's something I'm really passionate about, and I think with high quality ABA, you can get a lot done by just educating families. You're a parent of children with autism, and you're also a professional. How is that, navigating the two different sides? Do you find that there's burnout? Do you find that you have a hard time like turning on, turning off? Do you bring your BCBA self home?
I would say that the number one thing that I've learned from being a parent with autism and working in the field is the importance of having patience with parents, because it's nothing like when you're telling other parents how to do the job. Because when I come home, I find myself constantly not following my own advice, so it's hard to really switch and say, okay, so I spent hours, saying, okay, you got to do this. You have to set expectations. You have to reduce attention to certain behaviors. And then next thing you know, I'm off there spouting off at one of the kids, and thinking, oh my gosh, like what would I as a BCBA have said if they would have seen me acting that way?
Right.
So yeah, it's a lot of stress. As Kate talks about a lot, our home is organized chaos and a lot of times. And I find that the best thing that I can bring from ABA and my experiences as a BCBA is being proactive, right? So proactive strategies, making sure that you're setting those expectations ahead of time, that you are consistent with interventions as much as possible, when you get those feelings out. And just using more mindfulness. Like I like to use ACT therapy, even with myself, which is a therapy that is revolved around commitment and acceptance and grounded behavior in the caregiver so that they can provide better services and interventions to their own children. So I like to do that, meditate, try to defuse my brain from my behaviors, because I tend to get stuck, because as we're going to talk about a little later, I have a autism diagnosis myself, and I have to sometimes say, all right, when am I getting too rigid? When am I starting to perseverate on things that really don't matter that much, Tend to be very rigid, black and white with a lot of things. And change can sometimes be really challenging.
So you bring a lot of perspectives into your professional life. I imagine it's an advantage. How do you feel that, and I'm not sure how much you share with your families that you service. I know, like, when I go into homes, I like to make sure families know that I am a mother, because I think that does bring an extra layer of compassion and understanding to families. Like you're saying, I'm with you. I'm a behavior analyst. You see me at home, oh my goodness, I would be so embarrassed, because I'm not perfect, and there is extra layers of emotional variables that are intertwined, and just like the tiredness from the end of the day. But do you feel like your experiences help with your rapport building with your families, help with your mostly I guess rapport building, because I'm sure it probably brings a level of understanding in your treatment with the child directly?
Absolutely, and I think it really depends on what family you're talking with. One thing that I've gotten sort of a reputation for is being the BCBA that works with the, quote, difficult parents. And I've found that those experiences and that personal relation that I have, that I can relate how I live my life as a parent to these parents, it helps. I can think of, even before I was a BCBA, one of the first clients that I worked with had a mother that was labeled that. It was one of those ones that the agency was like, oh my gosh, like, they've gone through 3 BCBAs, they've gone through like 5 RBTs, And I took a risk, and I said, I told him about my son, who has autism level 3. So I understand how you're feeling. And from that moment, as soon as she knew that, she opened up a lot more. And Mom was very open to a lot of the feedback that I gave, because she particularly felt that if I were to give advice, it was something that she could use, because I was there. I've been there.
Right.
I've been in her shoes. So, I mean, I really do often relate parent training to my experiences as a father with 2 children on the autism spectrum. When I disclose my own diagnosis, that tends to be on the parent. I want to make sure that they don't have a stigma on autism, right? Because I do come across some parents that they're still very uncomfortable with the process. They still have a lot of misconceptions about what autism is and what autism isn't. So it could almost be a negative rapport.
Right.
Then they're like, well, what's this guy? I mean, he's going to defend my kid, when they're doing things that, I consider to be, not socially significant. So it works both ways, So it really depends on the family. Most families I do disclose both, that I'm a parent and my autism diagnosis, because, I think it does more good than bad.
You're just using your clinical judgment, I guess,
Exactly.
there, right? Determining if they're, you have a lot of variables, I think, intertwined with how parents perceive ABA. There's cultural, and there's just like learning, their history of what they've experienced in the past. And I think that's wise, because I could imagine that there could be those tough situations of like, okay, how's this guy gonna help my child, or like, but I think when people realize like, wow, he has this extra layer of understanding that really could help our children in a way that others might not be able to. I'm excited to pick your brain, because I always constantly have questions. When I have clients that can speak and share their thoughts and things, I love it, because I'm like, just tell me more. Like, so how do you feel when you experience this? Do you feel like your diagnosis and your understanding of autism in your own life helps you to understand your children better?
Absolutely, yes. Particularly since Kate is not autistic, she's neurotypical, and so there are some times when there's like, we have to sort of, sort of code switch, and say like, all right, this is what, our daughter's trying to tell us. This is why, especially with our daughter, because she is, that level 1, a lot of the things that she does can come off as defiant or difficult, and sort of just stopping and saying, yeah, she's just dysregulated right now. We need to start a little more simple. We need to get down to her level and say, all right, how can we solve this solution, rather than jumping right into like, oh my gosh. So, you're being disrespectful. You're being, because I see that all the time with a lot of parents, They don't know what is disrespectful and what is simply being in that like seeing red type of thing, because so much of the diagnosis is internal, But then we also have some jokers, that I'm sure you've worked with and I've worked with, that, they sort of pretend that they either don't know or that they're dysregulated, and then they're just trying to get out of something. So it takes a little bit of, again, that clinical judgment to see like, what behaviors are you seeing that indicate, which is which. I have one client that does that, where this client will engage in like really frantic, high-pitched vocalizations when he's talking, and that's how I know, oh, that's like true dysregulation. But when it's like slow and methodical, it's the same words, but it means I'm trying to get attention. I'm trying to get something out of it. Yeah. So it's that sort of finding that dichotomy,
I often joke and say that he and Rosalind are twins, and Grayson and I are twins, because I understand Grayson so much more than I understand Rosalind. And people always ask, how is that possible? Because, he's non-speaking.
Right.
He does communicate in other ways, but he I understand him, and I don't know if it's because I'm just so empathetic, but I really understand him so much better than I understand Rosalind in many ways. So whenever she's having a meltdown or she's having a really difficult day, I usually tell Derek, you'll often hear me say, Derek, you're going to deal with that, because I often have to kind of step away and take my time, because some of the things that she does really frustrate me, because I just don't understand. And I'm the first to admit I really just don't understand it. But with Grayson, I don't know what it is, but I just connect very well with him, and even without words, I get him. I don't know what it is, but I just get him. And I noticed that sometimes Derek has a lot of a disconnect with Grayson. So we tag team very well, and we make it work.
Yeah. And I think some of it as well, like, isn't necessarily as much a disconnect as it's some of, like, with my diagnosis, tolerating, like, the loud noises, or there was a time when Grayson would just scream all the time, for hours when he was much younger, and I had to step out and, like, regulate myself because of the sensory overload that I was getting. So a lot of the times I think when you're a parent with somebody who has those type of, like, behaviors, it's a little harder because, you have to manage your own sensory needs as well, Mm-hmm. I think along with that frustration of, okay, I treat other people's kids. I should be able to find the solutions for my own child as well. But it's not that simple. And that's why we have our outside help. We have our own ABA services that I try to stay as hands-off as possible in the treatment. I mean, I'll implement it, but as far as, like, coming up with strategies and things like that, I really do defer to his staff, because I think that's ethically the most important thing to do.
Sure.
Yeah, that's our number one rule in our house. We are not the staff. We're the caregivers. We are not the BCBA or the tech. So we will follow their guidelines. We will follow the crisis plan and everything like that, but we will not implement our own things and suggest our own. I mean, we might collaborate with them and give our opinions, but we will not kind of take the reign and take charge.
So you're kind of stepping back, letting them be the expert with your own children, and you're just mom and dad.
Yes.
Not just mom and dad, because that's huge. I mean, I always tell my families, like, you are such an important piece to this, but I think that's really wise, and that's probably what helps you. I'm guessing helps you avoid burning out.
Yes.
From going to work, coming home, because you are able to be dad.
Exactly, and there's sort of a novelty that comes into working with other cases, working with other kids, seeing how parents parent differently, seeing different sides of autism that sort of make you appreciate what you have and where you're at, and when you come home, like you said, having that unique experience that your own children have.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that the team, like your clinical team that supports your children, they probably really appreciate your approach, I imagine. Because that could be really scary. Like, I've worked with families where the parent was a BCBA, and it's like, oh, what am I going to train them on? Like, oh my goodness. I imagine by you guys allowing them to do their thing and putting that trust in them, it allows that, like, to work more organically and naturally, and less, I don't know, I would imagine if I were to come in your home, I would feel less concerned about, oh, here's the scary BCBA,
Well, and there's a lot of times when we don't even tell tech when we first start, because I don't want them to come in and, like, feel like they're being supervised, feel like they're being watched. I'll give ABA advice only if it's asked of me and if it's clinically appropriate, if it's just a general. I would never want to step on the toes of the consulting BCBA.
Right. That's great. I think it's very, like, there's a lot of humility in that. I think that's great.
But it also helps, I think, sometimes because we treat the techs the way we would want to be treated if we were on the case.
Yeah.
So it offers them a lot more peace of mind because they know that we're sort of applying that golden rule to them.
Have you guys ever, like either one of you, worked with families that were professionals in the field?
Yes, I
Oh,
have.
yes.
And I see the response, was that challenging?
It depends. It really
Okay.
does, because there are some that are on that opposite end where they want to be involved in every little thing. And they almost want to be the BCBA for their own kids. And I decided very early I never wanted to be that unless absolutely necessary. But then I've had people that had doctorates or were getting doctorates in ABA that were wonderful to work with, that were very gracious, that, you know, we would have wonderful discussions about the science, because one thing that's really great in those situations is we are speaking the same language.
Right, yeah.
So it's really cool. And even with our own BCBAs, you know, speaking the language, not having to simplify the jargon like we do often when we're working with parents that are not as experienced.
Right.
My very first client, his father was a BCBA.
Oh my.
And it was absolutely terrifying. He would do like competency checks on me, and it was very nerve-wracking. Every day I would see him, and I had to give like a whole report on my 12 hours with his child, and he was the BCBA of his child. It was very stressful. I lasted about 7 or 8 months on that case, and it was
a long time, actually.
the most stressful case I've ever been on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you really have to step back and think, like, how is this serving my child? So I think that's wonderful that you guys have that approach.
I know that in previous episodes we have discussed getting diagnoses young, and when like kiddos are toddlers or, you know, young adolescents. You had mentioned, obviously I know you have an autism diagnosis. I know your story about being diagnosed later in life. Can you just share a little bit about being diagnosed later in life and what that process looked like for you?
Sure. Yeah, it's actually really funny because I had no idea. I was even working with kids, you know, who had autism. And like I said, my preconceived notions were like, oh my gosh, like this is really hard. This is really, you know, kids that have autism, you know, they engage in behaviors that are challenging. Even when teaching, it was like, ooh, I don't know, you know. But once I got to understand them a little bit better, working with kids like that, like I was less uncomfortable. Now, with myself, same thing. It's like I had no idea. Like I was able to go to school, go to college, you know, pay my taxes, unlike the feelings of some people in our government right now. But yeah, I didn't know. So Kate was like, hey, like I'm noticing some things that maybe you should get checked out. Another story that was going on was I would get really nervous in interviews, and I would sort of ramble on and on and on and answer questions in a way that, you know, the people running the interviews didn't really gel with, you know. And it was like there was this major disconnect, like in my communication with others. So I got a diagnosis at 27. And it was even funny because some of the questions that were asked of me, I'd be like, oh, no, I don't do that. And Kate was there in the interview with me and was like, yes, you do. One of the biggest ones was routine changes. So I had no idea that I was living my life in a routine. So when I would wake up in the morning, I would do something first. Like I'd go get a shower first, then I'd go brush my teeth, then I would. So it was a specific order to things. And when I was living by myself, like I just did that on my own. Once other people were in my life, you know, and were able to see like, oh, well, why don't you try it this way? And I was like, no, that would mess up my whole day. Like, how am I going to do that? You know, so it's little things like that. And I think more importantly, getting that diagnosis was important because it helped me realize things about myself that I didn't know. And it helped me have a better peace of mind. It didn't really help me with services or things like that, but it helped me to say, oh, well, that's why I do things this way. That's why I have, severe anxiety about moving to other places. This is why, all through my life, I had trouble making friends and maintaining relationships. So you can become more aware, and it's easier to then say, okay, I'm acting like this right now. I need to either pursue mindfulness, need to pursue an alternative so that I can move in a more direction that I desire rather than being stuck in this cycle of rigidity.
So Kate was sharing that she utilizes ACT therapy, and like you keep mentioning like mindfulness. When did you start kind of using those strategies? Was that after Grayson's diagnosis? Was that before?
Yes, I had not known anything about acceptance commitment therapy until I was going to therapy myself. So I was getting really burnt out, really stressed, and I sought a therapist that actually had a doctorate in psychology, and he had we had had sessions for quite a while, probably 3 to 6 months, like just regular weekly meetings. And he had introduced me to the work of Russ Harris, who is one of the top voices in acceptance commitment therapy. And he had recommended a book called The Happiness Trap. And I read the book and I was like, oh my gosh, this is me. This is so like what I'm going through right now. And the fact that there are solutions and there are ways of getting out of your head and living a more meaningful life. So I always recommend people look into his work, look into basically those types of things.
Yeah, that's great. I think that ACT can be really helpful for a variety of people. Like I never even thought about it for parents of children that have special needs. I know with some of my clients, I've used it. And then recently a therapy location opened up, and I'm actually waiting to collaborate with the owners for a place in my town where they're providing that for individuals that are adults with autism diagnoses or other diagnoses. So when I saw that, I jumped in and I'm like, we need to connect. This is great. So yeah, I love that.
And it works really well with parents too. We've been on our team at ABA Centers, we've been running caregiver training groups. And in those groups, a lot of us have been using a curriculum with using ACT therapy with parents to reduce relational stress. And the response that we've gotten from a lot of parents was very positive.
That's great.
With that, for those that had the open mind, because it is very much a shift in the way of thinking. It goes from that reactive approach to a more like, okay, we're going to practice some things. We're going to work on ourselves first, and then we're going to be the less stressed parent that provides those services to our kids.
I could use it for myself. So, yeah, that's great. For the parents that are just getting a diagnosis, whether or not it's early on, later on, if there's one piece of advice that you could give them, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say I would keep going on the fact of getting services early. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to get help. Don't be afraid to admit that you don't have all the answers and that somebody or multiple people, can be utilized. I just think about, I'm sure Kate's talked in the past about relations like with her sisters and their journeys with getting, early intervention services. So it's like that idea of like, don't be scared to get services. They're only going to result in better outcomes, whether they have an autism diagnosis, whether they have a speech difficulty, whether it's simply ADHD or something like that. Early intervention is always the best way to go.
Now, for the families that didn't have that opportunity, I mean, you yourself are an individual that never had that intervention. fortunately, it worked out well for you. It seems like you're thriving. It seems like you have this ability to parent your children in a way that someone else couldn't. What if there is a child out there that's 10, that's 9, that they've never received a diagnosis? What do you recommend there?
Well, in those situations, I mean, it's never too late. I mean, it gets a little more challenging, particularly if there are behaviors, because, you know, they're bigger, they're more, there's more, like, opportunity for people to get hurt if they're aggressive, or even if they're not. You know, there's a lot more frustration that occurs at that age. So for those types of people, I think it's about destigmatizing autism. With the older kids, it's a lot of like what I went through, which is like, oh, you know, I don't need to worry about it because I, you know, live a normal life, you know. So making sure that gets destigmatized and saying like it's okay to be autistic.
Right.
For a lot of people, it's part of their identity. And even those that have level 1 or like low support needs, they still need support needs.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a problem if there are those types of things going on to go get therapy, to go talk to somebody, to pursue things that they enjoy and find others in their community that are also neurodiverse.
For sure. I think destigmatizing autism is very important. I mean, the reality that, you know, and you guys know this better than I do, that it's sometimes not easy, that it's life-altering. It does, from what you've shared, you know, kind of make certain things in life not possible for your family that might have been if your child didn't have level 3 autism. But I think, you know, and it kind of goes along with, you know, the acceptance portion of ACT, of just accepting that this is who my child is, and that's okay. And we're going to do the best we can with that. And I think just maximizing the quality of individuals' lives is really important. That's where, when I'm always thinking about my clients, are they happy? Are they healthy? Are they the best version of themselves? And I also think about their families too, you know, because it's not just about that individual. Usually when that individual thrives, their family thrives. Mm-hmm. But are their families healthy? Are they thriving? Are they the best versions of themselves? So that's kind of where my thought process always goes, but I'm always interested in hearing, you know, others' input, especially someone that, like you, that really has like a greater lens, like the both of you, you have a greater understanding of what life with autism is.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a parallel with what you're talking about with, I use a lot of skill-based treatment with clients, with like the studies of like Greg Hanley. And, you know, one thing that I took from his approach is the idea of happy, relaxed, and engaged. If a child is engaged, if they are showing a calm body, and if they are happy, like that's really the foundation of everything. If we can get to that point, like we're going to see a reduction in behaviors, we're going to see a increase in being able to learn, you know. So even though I don't use that approach for every kid, I do take that with me all of the time. That and the importance of assent in care as well. Yeah.
That's very important. I do come across scenarios where families have children that are older, and you don't have the parents' buy-in.
Yeah.
The buy-in of the teenager or the adolescent that's able to advocate for themselves and speak up. And I really have to share with the families that, you know, I have an obligation to make sure that they want to interact with me, that they want to participate in this treatment, that they see the value themselves. So 100%.
Absolutely. And one thing that I always was teaching in my last job, because I was a trainer of new staff, so we did a lot of talking about pairing and how that works in ABA. And one of the things that's so important is, like you were saying, each level of learner, from early to intermediate to advanced, have a different way of getting that buy-in, different way of getting the pairing. With older kids and with higher functioning kids, you know, we have we have more conversation-based, more relational building, and those that are like on that level 3, it's more of that like play interaction type of building the social skills. So assent looks very different. Pairing looks very different.
Right. And pairing never stops occurring. I mean, I can't count on my hands the number of times where I've had to say to people like, are we still rapport building? Are we still pairing with our clients? Are we still pairing with our families? Because it's not just that, I view it as the whole client, the whole family, the whole situation, but sometimes we're kind of nixing a portion of that very important equation out. And, the client likes me, but mom could care less. Okay, well, that's a big deal.
Yes, we've run into several situations like that in our own treatment. So, yeah, we've definitely, it matters.
Yeah, it
really
does.
Oh, yeah. Grayson definitely knows which texts and which BCBAs he's going to work well with.
Yes.
And he doesn't have to tell us. He shows us in the way he interacts with them from day one.
Yep, we can usually tell within 2 hours if someone's going to work out or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's good for, efficiency. If they need to come off the case or, so forth. But
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, that was a lot of great information. Thank you, Derek. I think that we would love to have you on again. I think that there's so much we could pick your brain about. So thank you so much for coming today.
Well, and thank you for inviting me.
Of course.
Join us next time as we discuss building your village and growing your community as an autism family and a caregiver of people with autism.
And we want to say a great big thanks again to Lancaster Catholic High for allowing us to use your space to spread awareness of autism and to discuss some of these really important topics. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you have not already. We are on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon.
Sip and stim. Sip and stim.